Hello, thank you very much. I'm Agathe Toumoulin. I'm a PhD student in paleoclimate modeling at CEREG, where I'm supervised by Yannick Donadieu. And today I'll be talking about an important part of my PhD work, which aim at understanding the effect of the Drake Passage opening on the global ocean circulation and temperatures. All the results I'll show you today are part of a study that was recently published in Paleoceanography and Paleoclimatology, with some of the authors you may recognize here. So a very brief context, because you all have heard about the Drake Passage opening. It's supposed to have started around 50 million years ago. And historically, it was thought after Kennett's publication in 1977 that when the Drake Passage opened, then it enabled the formation of the Antarctic circumpolar current, which allowed Antarctic ice sheet formation at a large scale. However, we know now that PCO2 lowering was required to explain this important change and also the greenhouse icehouse transition. But the Drake Passage opening may still have had a great impact on the ocean system. It has notably often been related to three major ocean changes, which are the characteristic of the modern ocean circulation. Notably, first, the initiation of the Antarctic circumpolar current with neodymium studies from Cher and Martin, 2004 and 2006, for instance. The onset of a cooler South Atlantic Ocean as compared to the North Atlantic, and the beginning of North Atlantic deep water. Both the South Atlantic cooling and the North Atlantic deep water formation would have contributed to create a thermal differentiation between the South and the North Atlantic that has been described by, for instance, Borelli et al. And you can see here one of our figure here showing the differentiation of North and South Atlantic temperatures from delta 8 isotopic values. However, while part of the effect of the Drake Passage opening have been quite widely described concerning the Eocene climate, surface climate, it's now broadly, its effect on the ocean circulation have been poorly documented through modeling. Most of the studies have used modern or modern-like boundary conditions with, for instance, low PCO2 and present-day geographies or present-day geographies with key geographical change with, for instance, open Panama Seaway. And they described the onset of as strong as today Antarctic circumpolar current, North Atlantic deep water formation, and strong surface temperature change. However, both the use of modern landmass and low PCO2 have been shown, for instance, by Zhang et al. In 2010 and Lefebvre et al. In 2012, to yield stronger effect of the Drake Passage opening concerning the surface temperatures, but also the strength of the Antarctic circumpolar current. Some realistic experiments have also been done and give various and more moderate results. They have slower ACC and lower or no temperature change, and sometimes, mainly depending on the configuration of their Arctic seaway, they may or not have North Atlantic deep water formation. But most of these studies have focused on surface climates, and they do not document all the free change in ocean dynamics and properties I just mentioned. Thus, we've been deciding to test the effect of the Drake Passage on the ocean system to see to what degree it may explain the onset of these modern ocean characteristics. We only used one model, the IPSL CM5A2 general circulation model. In its fully coupled configuration, it's a model with a rather good resolution with a 31-layer ocean. And we did 4 simulations with different depth of the Drake Passage. 0 meter, so Drake closed configuration. Here in all the simulation, I will call it DC. 100 meter deep Drake Passage, 1000 meter, and 2500 meter. They all use PCO2 that is 4 times the pre-industrial levels. And for million years geography that you can see here. It's a geography that was made by Fernando Poblete, and that is notably characterized by open Panama Seaway, Arctic Seaway, Tasman Gateway, and that has a submerged Kerguelen Plateau. All the simulations were launched for 4,000 years until they reached a quasi-equilibrium state, so we can check what's happening in the deep ocean. So for the results, here are the reconstruction of the average 0 to 300 meter surface, 0 to 300 meter currents across the Southern Ocean. And you can see in the Drake close configuration on the left that when the Drake passage is closed, there's already a 40° south current between the South Atlantic and the South Indian. And then these currents divide into two branches, one circumventing the Australia by the north and the other by the south, that then meet again in the Ross Gyre, here RG. In this configuration, both the Ross Gyre and Weather Gyre are rather strong. But then, as soon as the Drake passage opens, this 40° south current strengthens and forms a complete ring around Antarctica, which named here proto-ACC. In this configuration, the Weddell and Ross Gyre are weakened. More quantitatively, the estimation of the proto-ACC strength at the Drake passage range between 1.3 Sverdrup to 33.9 Sverdrup and increased with the deepening of the Drake passage. It's way weaker than the modern ACC estimates that has been described to be between 136 and 173 Sverdrup, but it's in the range of other Eocene realistic model studies. The good news is that it's in agreement with some proxy data that have been saying that there was a complete, although moderate, proto-ACC during the late Eocene. And it's also in agreement concerning the Antarctic countercurrents that you can see here in our Drake close configuration, and that has been set to stop following the Drake passage or the Tasman Gateway opening. And that's what we got here, because as soon as we got a proto-ACC, then there's no place for this current anymore. This circulation change will have a direct impact on the surface temperature we have. On the top left is a map showing the temperatures for the Drake close simulation, and then the other subfigures are anomalies compared to the Drake close simulation for the different deepings. And there's a mixing of the southern part, the southern Pacific part of the Southern Ocean with the Atlantic waters that are warmer, and this horizontal mixing creates both a warming in the Pacific part and a cooling in the Atlantic and Indian part. But the effect of the cooling in the Atlantic and Indian sector of the Southern Ocean is not directly linear, and we can observe that the stronger effects are visible in the Drake 1000 meter simulation. It's more precisely the strongest near the Kerguelen Plateau, where we can observe a 5-degree difference. When we make the average over the Atlantic sector of the Southern Ocean for the simulation, we got a 2.5-degree cooling as compared to Drake close, and a 3.5 cooling for the Indian sector. This dipole pattern has already been documented by some earlier model studies, and it's in agreement for the warming part with some data that have been describing a warmer South Pacific sector as compared to the South Atlantic. However, we do not reconstruct the surface warming in the North Atlantic that has sometimes been described by some modeling data that observe the onset of North Atlantic deep water. But all these surface temperatures are not only resulting from the horizontal mixing, and they also a lot rely on shifting convection zones. Here you can see a map of the winter mixed layer depth, of the winter mixed layer thickness within the different simulation, and that indicates major spots of deep water formation. And you can see that while in direct close configuration, most deep water form in the weather sea in the Atlantic sector of the Southern Ocean. When the Drake Passage opens, then this big convection cell divide into several, and most deep water form then in the Pacific sector of the Southern Ocean. This change in the convection will change the southward transport of heat and then intensify both the Pacific warming and the Atlantic cooling. It's also interesting to note here that we do not have deep convection in the Northern Hemisphere, and it's visible because we do not have a thick mixed layer there. And it's also clearly visible on this plot that show the average meridional transport. As soon as the Drake Passage opens, it's clearly visible in Drake 100 simulation. There's a strengthening of the south to north deep water transport, and also the onset, the an increase of the Antarctic bottom water formation. This is a result of the fact that when the convection zone shifts to the Pacific part, then the Pacific is wider and deeper than the Atlantic, and it enables the transport of a bigger volume of water. Also visible here and from the figure I just shown before with the mixed layer thickness, we do not have North Atlantic deep water, and it's probably the result of the fact our Arctic gateways are open. Our surface water in the Atlantic are not salty and dense enough to sink. Both the surface temperature and the dynamics change I just described will directly affect the temperature of the deep ocean. In the Pacific sector, where there's a cooling near the margin of the Antarctica in the Ross Sea and big convection, the cooling will be transferred down to the bottom ocean to all latitude, whereas in the Atlantic that show a stronger cooling, as the convection decreases, it will only be visible in the southernmost most latitude of this basin. And because of the reduction of the south to north transport in this basin, there will also be a warming in the North Pacific water here. It's nice to observe that we can have such warming here because it has often been interpreted as a sign of North Atlantic deep water formation in the North Atlantic. So it could be also an explanation, this change in south to north transport. Here we have a 1.5 degree cooling for the maximum opening of the Drake Passage we test, and it's not far from the 2 degree that has been documented by the data. And in the simulation with the highest surface temperature change, which is again Drake 1000 meter, we managed to reach this 2 degree difference. To go a little bit further, we finally investigated the atmospheric change over the Southern Ocean, and the stronger cooling is over the Indian sector here, and seems to be also correlated to an increase in low cloud cover and the planetary albedo. Thanks to the presence of a low pressure cell here in the Weddell Sea and a high pressure cell here in the East Antarctic, the cooling that has been described previously in the Atlantic sector is then transferred to the continent and result in a 2.3 degree cooling. And it's in agreement with some earlier modeling studies, Kennedy et al. 2015, that has been describing something like a 3 degree cooling of the continent. It's not enough to explain large scale ice growth on Antarctica, but it may still have contributing, creating good conditions, enabling the onset of continental glaciation. So to conclude, we may say that our results show that the Drake Passage opening led to an important cooling of some of the Southern Ocean sector, and significant change in ocean circulation that rather well fit to the data observation, notably concerning the Atlantic deep ocean temperature asymmetry. But we do not support a direct link between the Drake Passage opening and North Atlantic deep water. Instead, we suggest that change in deep south to north circulation could be an alternative way to understand the North Atlantic warming signal. And we may conclude by saying that the Drake Passage opening was unlikely responsible for a complete transition from Eocene to modern oceans, but still was an important step. Thank you for your attention.